It's a little bit of cheeky sadism on his part, I think, as if he's saying, I won't tell you. I won't give you the comfort of being able to confront and shrug off the reality I present. Instead, think of the worst. That's what it is. Better than food, man. Do 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 do. I'm gonna haunt you, do 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 do, haunt you till you die and day. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. I'm your host, Clifford Lee Sargent. Great to see you. As always, hope you're doing well. Get that coffee. Fabian Del Sol there. That's a great song. Delicious from Brazil. We survived the hurricane. Prayers to Poseidon. Today is The Turn of the Screw, a Gothic novella by the American-British author Henry James, published in 1898. In my last review, which was of E.T.A. Hoffman's The Sandman, the viewer June Chevalier mentioned this book, The Turn of the Screw, and I thought now is the perfect time to review it, so thank you very much, June Chevalier, for watching and commenting and recommending this book. I'm sure many people have recommended this to me way back when, so whoever was the first, thank you very much. Henry James was born in America, died in England, lived in both countries, though longer in England, eventually becoming a citizen, and wrote this book while he was living there. Nevertheless, it's considered to be a work of American literature, and a classic. I'll say more about his biography when I review one of his other novels down the road. I think I'll start with The Wings of the Dove. In the perfect Gothic tradition of the found document motif, which you can find in everything from Bram Stoker's Dracula to H.P. Lovecraft's The Call of Cthulhu, The Turn of the Screw starts off with a man named Douglas, relating to his company around a fire in his abode, after they were discussing ghost stories, the most horrific tale he's ever come across. From a manuscript he owns written by a governess giving an account of what she experienced. She was the governess of this man Douglas's sister, and at this point she's been dead for 20 years. But before she died, she sent him this piece of writing. And aside from Douglas himself, this is the first time that anyone has heard the story. And Douglas seems reluctant to tell it. And the narrator seems to be a fictionalized version of James himself. For sheer tear, I remember asking? He seemed to say it wasn't so simple as that, to be really at a loss how to qualify it. He passed his hand over his eyes, made a little wincing grimace. For dreadfulness. Oh, how delicious, cried one of the women. He took no notice of her. He looked at me, but as if, instead of me, he saw what he spoke of. For general uncanny ugliness and horror and pain. Well then, I said, just sit right down and begin. The story is not without a sense of humor. So yeah, as the preface by James informs us, the inspiration for this story came from real life. One night while sitting with some friends in a country house, they began discussing how there were no new quality ghost stories. A friend of James mentioned a story he'd been told by a woman years previously, which contained the vague outline of the one James went on to construct in this book. The Turn of the Screw is the story of a woman's gradual slide down into a quiet hell of mental turmoil. And while you're probably not seeing ghosts and slipping into psychological chaos to quite the same degree, I certainly hope not at least, it is, without question, a very difficult time for maintaining mental health. It's a time of incredible stress, financial, social, political, you name it. You're living through it. You know. And we need tools for taking care of our mental health. And I'm an enthusiast of anything that can potentially help. Some of my personal favorites are getting enough sleep, eating healthy, exercise, weightlifting, even just walking, reading. And another tool is therapy, which is why I'd like to tell you about the sponsor of today's video, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make finding therapy more affordable and accessible, which is helpful because finding a therapist could be potentially difficult given the slim options in your area, especially if you live somewhere rural, because, in that situation it could be tough to find the right therapist in person. But it's also a time saver, finding one who's the right fit just using your phone or your computer, as opposed to traveling to an office and finding out it's not the right fit and repeating that process over and over and over. None of us have time to lose, And unlike many things these days, they make finding a therapist easy, because it's online, it's remote, and by filling out a few questions online, BetterHelp can match you with a therapist in as little as just a few days. And they make it easy to get matched with a therapist. There's a link below in the description. It's betterhelp.com/BTF. Clicking on that link helps support the show, but it also gets you 10% off your first month with BetterHelp, so you can try them out and see if it works for you. And I sincerely hope it does. And because finding the right therapist is a little bit like dating, as if you needed more challenges of that nature in your life right now, I know, I get it. If you don't initially fit with your therapist, you can switch to a new therapist at any time at no additional cost, without having to worry about health insurance or who's in your network or anything like that. No worries. So if you're struggling right now, and let's be honest, who isn't? Please consider online therapy with BetterHelp. And thanks again to BetterHelp for supporting this channel. So the story starts like this. An English governess is hired by the uncle of two children in his care after their parents died. The uncle lives in London, but the children, a young boy named Miles and his younger sister Flora, live out in a large rural country estate in Essex. The proposal is that the governess travel out to the estate to educate them. The governess, who is never named, learns that the previous governess has died. She is not told how. We also don't know how the children's parents died. An emphasized stipulation of taking the job is that she will not bother the uncle. While the governess is initially charmed by the kids who couldn't be more well behaved, there are some strange things that begin almost immediately. Early on, she learns that the young boy Miles has been expelled from his school for reasons which the administration will not directly say in writing. The governess learns this before she meets Miles, but upon meeting Miles, she can't imagine why he'd be expelled. Like his sister, he's the embodiment of the perfect child, right? Then, the governess begins seeing a man around the house, once on a tower and then closer, on the other side of a window, peering in, as if searching for something. Both times he vanishes and she can't find him anywhere. Then she begins seeing a strange, dark woman who comes and goes the same way. She learns that these characters are Miss Giselle, the previous governess, and Peter Quint, a lower servant of the house who worked there previously. They had a relationship together, kind of an illicit relationship, or so it seems, because of the class difference. The setting is in Victorian England, so decorum is of the highest importance, right? Class is a big thing, and a lower servant with a governess is off limits. And it seems that both of them were deviants of some variety. And I say were because they're dead. And as the governess begins to understand, they're trying to get closer to the children, the reason for which is not clear, and there's all sorts of interpretation as to what they are and what they're doing. The Turn of the Screw is the most intelligent Gothic novel I have ever read. It's a meticulous, dense, labyrinthine, highly unique, intellectually complex, and challenging story, having you second-guessing yourself along the entire journey as the protagonist second-guesses herself in nearly every other sentence. The result is an engrossing, highly impressive experience of being in the hands of a literary master. The subtlety is exquisite, and the deep dread the reader feels is quite literally, and you'll understand if you've read the book, due to not what is said, but what is not said. Realizing the threat of these apparitions to the children, the governess firmly makes it her mission to save them, trying to combat the influence of these ghosts. In the process, though, she starts to become obsessive, paranoid, off-kilter to say the least. And all of this is exaggerated by the culture of Victorian English modesty, right? Which Henry James employs with great success, so that the tension of manners is so thick in virtually every scene you could cut it with a knife. Nothing is ever explained entirely, nothing. Even though, as we're privy to as readers, the governess frenetically increases her mental gymnastics in a desperate attempt to figure out just what the hell is going on. The servant, Mrs. Gross, a humble housekeeper, is her sole compatriot and confidant in this endeavor. She herself seems to know more than she lets on, but wringing it out of her is a trying challenge for the governess. But she does get the story about Peter Quint and Miss Giselle from her, because she's worked in the house for a while and she recognized them by the governess's description of them. She hasn't seen them herself, and there's reason to believe that she can't see the ghosts at all. That in fact, maybe it's just the governess and the children, or maybe just the governess. I think Edmund Wilson was the first one to posit that theory. Again, there's a lot of different interpretations. What further complicates the issue for the governess is her gradual realization that the children are colluding with the ghosts and tricking her at various moments so they can be with them. Whether the ghosts are working through them, in a strange case of possession as it often seems, or the children are acting of their own accord, is up to interpretation, as so many things in the novel are. James employs one of the strangest, most deliberately bewildering writing styles I have ever read. You'll recognize this if you've read him. He'll begin a statement, and between beginning and concluding, will often throw 1 to 2 statements inside that statement, like these asides, causing you to fall off track before arriving at the end. James is the opposite of direct in his writing, right? He is the opposite of Hemingway. The most confusing line I read, and maybe the most confusing line in English that I've ever read, which honestly makes me second guess if I can speak the language, was the following. This is when she's just talking about the importance of her charming work. The good thing, after all, was that we should surely see no more of him, and this is the part that confused the hell out of me. This was not so good a thing, I admit, as not to leave me to judge that what, essentially, made nothing else much signify was simply my charming work. What? I actually broke that sentence down using ChatGPT. I was fascinated how I completely just fell off in the middle there. That is one of the most baffling sentences I've read outside of Hegel. It's like hopping on stones over a pit of lava, and I keep falling in trying to get my balance, while trying to comfort myself with the reminder that I actually speak English. I mean, it's maddening, but it's simultaneously kind of riveting, right? Because you know, we do speak English, we do read in English, and when you come across somebody who's doing things with the language that you've never seen done before, stylistically, in a way that's so idiosyncratic, you're just like, whoa, you know, like, wow. It's not just stuffiness or pretension. It's really very intentional. And you're just kind of in awe, you know? The vast majority of the book is comprehensible and enjoyably puzzling, but sometimes his style is a real challenge. And that's refreshing in a way. Especially in a style that historically is not particularly challenging at all. You know, the Gothic novel. I mean, it's you know, if anything, it's kind of regrettably facile you know? So that's why this book stands out so much in the genre, because it is really intellectually powerful. While it's a verbose and challenging read just in the nature of its style, it's not difficult at all to follow once you sit with James for a bit. And I found myself gradually more and more enjoying the nature of his style, because there's always intention in the complexity, right? He's fucking with you the whole time. He's trying to show you what it's like to witness a woman reflecting on her actions in great detail while trying to stave off her descent, which she's unaware of, into madness. The whole tone of the novella is one of sinister claustrophobia, because you're trapped in this woman's mind in this creepy house, sequestered in the rural countryside, and immersed in a culture of these strange, repressed English manners. There are a lot more barriers culturally here, you know, so that creates this tension. So that small actions take on enormous significance. One could see how a person isolated like this could become preoccupied with small details. It's a story you've likely heard before, as it's a classic and there have been several film adaptations, or films inspired by it. The Innocents from the 60s and The Others with Nicole Kidman, neither of which I've seen. I've seen clips from The Others, but that's slightly a different story. But it's such an eerie, beautifully crafted setup that it shouldn't matter if you already pretty much know the story. Nothing is solved or explained in the story, absolutely nothing. This, I think, is one of the greatest methods to effectively creating a horror novel. It's that age-old wisdom of the horror authors or filmmakers. I can't recall who I originally heard it from, but I remember someone saying something to the effect of, "Why is Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds so scary? Because we have no idea why the birds are behaving the way they do." Explaining things away, giving a rational reason for why they exist or why they occur, diminishes their horrific nature, just pours a bunch of water on that fire. Because to explain is to know, and to know is to control. And when you're writing about things or forces that are beyond our control, when you're writing about the unknown, the last thing you want the unknown to be is known. Now, I'm sure this method can be exploited out of laziness or ineptitude, but there isn't a single lazy thing to be found in James's book. And there's a great passage that illustrates this. When the governess is explaining to Mrs. Gross, who is not the brightest bulb, that it's not seeing Miss Giselle which gives her fear, it's not seeing her. This is when the governess realizes that Flora is seeing the ghost, but she doesn't want her to know about it. "Because I'm clear, Flora doesn't want me to know." And this is Mrs. Gross. "It's only then to spare you." "No, no, there are depths. Depths. The more I go over it, the more I see in it. And the more I see in it, the more I fear. I don't know what I don't see, what I don't fear." Mrs. Gross tried to keep up with me. "You mean you're afraid of seeing her again?" "Oh no, that's nothing, now." Then I explained, "It's of not seeing her." But my companion only looked wan. "I don't understand." "Why, it's that the child may keep it up, and that the child assuredly will, without my knowing it." To know, to understand, even if initially frightening, eventually is to control. And this is a story about the loss of control. And while writing this review, I discovered I was correct in my assertions about James utilizing a lack of explanation, as James himself in the preface to The Turn of the Screw says almost this very thing. There are many debates as far as the interpretations of this story. There's a great lecture and a series of lectures on the classics of American literature by Arnold Weinstein, linked below, which was recommended to me by my friend and patron Josh. Thanks a bunch, man. Weinstein mentions that a common interpretation of this book after it was published was that the two ghosts are sexual predators grooming the children, and that this is the definition of their evil. Because the evil is never explained, it's never defined. It's just safe to say that it's diabolical, it's awful, it's unholy or something, you know? It's the worst you can think of. And this is very intentional on the part of James, as we'll see. There are so many speculations as to what this evil the ghosts seek to do is exactly, but we don't know exactly, and that was completely intentional on the part of James, using what he terms adumbration, a vague suggestion as opposed to concrete action. It's highly effective because this means that whatever the reader's definition of the most malignant evil entails, that's what James suggests the ghosts are doing. So it's the worst for everybody, right? Because it's so vague. It's a little bit of cheeky sadism on his part, I think. As if he's saying, I won't tell you. I won't give you the comfort of being able to confront and shrug off the reality I present. Instead, think of the worst. That's what it is. Thus, the threat for the reader is truly inescapable. And in our individual subjectivity, we are constructing the gravity of the tale along with the author. It's genius. It's so fucking genius. I can't get over it. It's so fucking good. It's so fucking good! You just gotta stand back and admire that. Just like, you've totally, like, tricked us, but not just that. It's transcends trick. It's like, it's perfect. It's genius. I don't know. For a horror story? That's me bowing down before Henry James, of course. Weinstein also mentions the interpretation of the literary critic Edmund Wilson, who wrote in his essay The Ambiguities of Henry James, that in fact there are no ghosts. It's all the Freudian psychological repression of the governess. Fair enough. According to Weinstein, Wilson's interpretation was because the children never mentioned the ghosts. But that's not actually true, as you'll see right near the end of the book. So maybe I'm misunderstanding something, but if that's the case, that Wilson is in fact saying that it's because the kids never mentioned the ghosts, I might be skeptical of Wilson's interpretation. But it certainly seems valid, though I haven't read it. Oscar Wilde called The Turn of the Screw a most wonderful, lurid, poisonous little tale. That quote's actually on the back of this edition. I agree, and my impression is similar. It's an eerie pathological diary. The morbid presence of these entities is like this ghostly malevolent fog, cloaking and subtly attacking this woman's psyche, warping her perspective and turning everything the children do into this insidious plot. Everywhere she sees sinister conspiracy. Every secret spells doom for their innocence. Every action suggests their willing submission to damnation. But you have to remember that it's all told in these extremely understated Victorian English exchanges. The strongest elements of the book are the tone and atmosphere James constructs, but above all, the writing itself. Never spelling it out for the reader, but neither making it so verbose and perplexing that they're left in the dark and can't follow the narrative thread. Its convincing, minute details of the thought patterns of the governess perfectly encapsulates the state of her neurotic preoccupation with the children and saving them. I love the complexity and the subjectivity and the total lack of concrete knowing that will settle the reader. It's a game. Everything's intentional, and it was executed magnificently. Better than food. A nice intellectual ghost story for Halloween. This was the first Henry James I've read, and I'll most certainly be reading more. So you should read it. Anyone who is into Poe, Kafka, and Jorge Luis Borges, who said that Henry James was the strangest author he knew of. Heavy words coming from Borges, an extremely well-read author and a strange writer himself. Another English author I thought of who utilized the vague representation of horrifying supernatural threats was Algernon Blackwood in his novella The Willows, which is about an encounter a couple of men have while canoeing down the Danube. Great novella. Really strange. And if you enjoy Gothic puzzles and literary narratives, you may also enjoy The Name of the Rose by the Italian author Umberto Eco. Excellent book. Cool. All right. Coffee time. For those of you who are new, thank you very much for stopping by and watching. I take all the names of the patrons who are financially supporting the show on Patreon and I place their names in this mason jar. And for every review, I pull out a name. And whoever's name I pull out is sent a hard copy of the book I'm reviewing, plus a bag of coffee, roasted by yours truly. And the coffee is delicious. If you would like to get in on that and help support the show, thank you very much. I sincerely appreciate it. You can click on the link below or go to patreon.com/books-are-better-than-food, and the tiers start at $5 per video. On average, I make 3 to 4 a month. And please make sure to set a limit if you're on a budget. You'll still get access to all the content posted. In addition, for becoming a paid patron, you'll get access to all this cool stuff. And international shipping is included. All right. Thank you very much to all my patrons, and best of luck. Okay, here we go. BKB. Thank you very much, BK. Really appreciate it. You're going to receive The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, plus a bag of delicious coffee, roasted by yours truly, and I hope you love both. Cheers. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed this, and please hit the notification bell to get notified every time I release a video. Very important. And always remember, die reading. All right. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you very much to everyone who sent their well wishes regarding the hurricane. Thank you. I really appreciate it. It means a lot. We were fine. No damage. We're all good here. I wish I could say the same for many other people, but unfortunately that's not the case. It looks like it was pretty bad. Well, thank you very much for watching. I hope you're staying safe. Hope you're doing well. Great to see you as always. Take care of yourselves. Have a good night. Talk to you soon. Ciao.